Hi, everyone, and welcome to Studio Jake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. Thank you for joining me today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe because today I have a brand new author. He just released his first fictional work, George Denny. He is the author of the new sci-fi alternative history Wokelynd, and I'm going to bring him on to talk about it. I'm very excited. I always love having fellow novelists on. So, George, welcome to Studio Jake.
Thanks for having me, Jacob.
So, tell us, we have, for those of you who are wondering, I've got his book right here on the screen, Wokelynd. And my understanding is, from what I've read, is it is about an alternative California. And so I was curious, would you share with my audience, what the book is about? Give us a little synopsis, and we'd love to hear about who the characters are and and just obviously don't give away spoilers if you don't want to, but if I would love to hear what the book is about and what the plot involves.
Sure. Well, you mentioned the setting right off the top. We have a futuristic California in 2066. The reason I chose it that way and made sure to set California independent from the rest of the United States is really so that they could have total authority to implement some of the most extreme, quote unquote, social justice ideas that we really saw first rise to prominence in 2020. So the world of Wokelynd, called New California, is one where identity and any sort of historical victim argument can trump the logic and reason that once reigned supreme in certainly in a free society, one with free speech. That is the goal. But in our current California, and perhaps the California of 2066, the value of a speaker's speech is often determined by the value of their identity. Uh, our main character is a young, good looking black guy. He's 18 years old. He's straight. He wants to meet a girl. He has a value, the value of his identity as a African American helps him, but as a straight man, that's something that he has to overcome. And Act One ends with him participating on an attack on the Nevada border. And in this attack, which becomes a sort of dark comedy for veterans of actual combat, we see some of the problems up close with a virtue signaling based society. And that's one of the motivations for writing this novel. I think during 2020, a lot of us had the same idea, which was, all these a lot of these concepts of equity and so forth, they sound great, but when push comes to shove, there's really nothing to fall back on, and you're on your own. And uh, and Wokelynd comes from that. I mean, it's a long book, so it's a lot to cover, but I hope I've given you a taste at least of the world that we're talking about.
From what you're telling me, it doesn't sound like California is that far off. I actually lived in California from 2015 to 2022, and a lot of people don't believe me when I say there are pockets of places where people are more traditional, there's more conservatism, but the liberal pockets are just so broad and so condensed, I guess is what you could say, when they're broad at the same time as they're also condensed, and they have this way about them. Like, I remember one time my wife and we went to a lantern show where people were lighting lanterns and sending them up. It was very pretty, but there were these protesters there who were protesting because they some people got jailed for blocking traffic, kind of what we were seeing now, we're seeing that now with the Stop Oil Now people. And so it's kind of interesting hearing how it gets pushed back, and you do feel like you're the lone whatever. Like, I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment. Sometimes I felt like I was the only person in all of California who believed in the Second Amendment. It is really so that personification of your character sounds very accurate to how I'm sure a lot of people feel in the state of California. And I'm curious, did a certain incident set this idea in motion, or is it just sort of the pile on of what's going on in the states as far as politics that inspired this novel?
Well, I think it's exactly that. I mean, in a perfect world, you wouldn't care about politics. You wouldn't even need to know who your president is. In the current state of San Francisco, you need to know who picks up your garbage, because even that is a cause of rampant corruption. So a lot of my experience of San Francisco in the booming teens was, using the city as a young adult playground, and that's a great way to ignore all the political problems of it. In 2020, I mean, it's funny you mentioned the Second Amendment, because that's actually when I had the same thought as everyone else, which is, if I'm on my own out here, I may as well be a well armed on my own. And every single time I went to the peninsula to buy weapons, the lines were around the block, and you basically had to go to a private dealer because, I mean, the impact of really knowing that the system doesn't care about you. I mean, you mentioned protests, right? So it was just yesterday in downtown Los Angeles, the 110 freeway, which is a clogged artery at the best of times,
Oh
was
yeah.
held up by protesters. And you would love for the system to come down on that and give you a sense that, well, the next time the protesters will be cleared out of the way and will not be, will not hold the whole city hostage. But it's pretty clear that they had the run of the mill in San Francisco. So I lived in the middle of the city in the 6 weeks following George Floyd's death. There were nightly fireworks going off at all times. It sounded like the city was being bombed.
Mm.
The You could sleep with earplugs, but the glass ringing from a firework that just gone outside. I mean, it felt like chaos and anarchy, and that's sort of where the beginning of Wokelynd, I think, came from. And absolutely, it's a response to politics. California having it's a wonderful place to live, with the exception of everything that the state can ruin.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's funny you mentioned the BLM and Antifa riots, because I remember when that was going on. I was living in LA at the time. Our neighborhood in the Valley is now, I didn't live in this particular section, but just kind of, I would say north of me is where people like Elizabeth Olsen, Kevin Hart, and a few other celebrities lived. What's interesting is because of that, the march never made it to our neighborhood. And I always thought that that was kind of interesting, because my wife and I were thinking, hey, what do we do if the marches, because they were coming up, I forget the name of the street, but they were coming up. It's a really well-known thoroughfare through the valley, and we lived right off of it. And we're thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to come through. I mean, businesses were boarding up. And then, like, we could hear them in the distance, kind of like you were saying, they were setting off fireworks and things like that. They never made it to our neighborhood. And we were like, what? Like, you could see where the block, we actually drove through the street a couple of days later, and you could see, because they hadn't cleaned it up yet, where our block began, where our little neighborhood began. And they had literally stopped there. And I thought that that was funny, because it's like, oh, it's all of the celebrities who live up in those hills. There's no way that the state was going to let them get disrupted, right? Everyone else, all these poor businesses, these mom and pop stores. One of my favorite burger joints, it was called Queen's Burgers, got closed down because, by the way, a Hispanic owned business, so not a white owned business. It got closed down because they broke all the windows and destroyed all the tables. I don't know if they made it in the kitchen, but you could see from the outside just how bad the damage was, and it closed down as a result of that. And I'm curious, where, like I said, Hollywood always seems to get this sort of preferential treatment when it comes to things like that. Like, even like during the strike. So these are people voluntarily not working during the SAG and Actors Guild strike. the Screen Actors Guild strike, to be more specific. They were they were willing to give them taxpayer money for the strike, and I just found that mind blowing to me. These are people who their unions have funds for when they go on strike. You've got millionaire actors like George Clooney donating to them, but they're still going to get preferential treatment from people like Gavin Newsom, who's willing to give them taxpayer money. And I'm just curious, with have in your novel specifically, does Hollywood play a role in what's going on with the state? You almost can't do a book about California without Hollywood, and so I'm a little curious: does Hollywood play a significant role in this?
Well, we do have some Hollywood movie titles in Wokelynd, such as Hoosiers 2, Trans Girls Mop the Floor. We also have the all-female remake of Saving Private Ryan, which
Nice.
sends one character into a that's when he sort of gives up on our entertainment industry. And Hollywood movies are actually used in the diversity, equity, inclusion camp to enforce certain orthodoxies. So yes, it's all over there. It is also going to be, if someone reads this book in 100 years, I hope they will say, well, this guy is talking about Hollywood as it was in the 2020s, because my assumption is that things are so bad, just as we're in an era that's almost like, it seems, the 80s studio era, only even worse and even more transparent. And
Oh yeah.
the 80s studio era gave us the 90s indie era and Quentin Tarantino and a whole lot of guys that were given creative license that they wouldn't have gotten in the 80s. And these days, the audiences are leaving. So everything that people predicted 5 years ago is now coming to fruition. Disney's done so much brand damage that they are ready for a full-on about face. I think the real question, so obviously the double standard is all over Wokelynd. I mean, the double standard is crucial to the way that all of this operates. It's crucial to the gaslighting. Oh, if I lost you for a second there. But when it comes to Hollywood, I would say that the great part of Hollywood is as a sort of a wokeness signaling system, which it sort of has become today. Very few examples to the contrary, and when there are, they're usually from independent studios or something like the Daily Wire, that is directly trying to go the other direction.
And as someone who you said you worked in Hollywood and been around Hollywood for, being a California native, I'm curious, why are they continuing doubling down? I mean, I have my own theories, but it feels like Disney has had 7 box office bombs in a row. And I remember growing up in the 90s and the 2000s, that was unheard of. You didn't like every once in a while they didn't market a movie very well, like Treasure Planet, and so that even though it's a great film, it didn't do well at the box office. But you never heard of even 2 in a row bombing. It would always be, if there was one bomb, there would be 5 successes following it. And why do you think so many studios are doubling down on this DEI, on this woke messaging? And do you think that, as far as cinema is going, do you think that there's a chance to right the ship?
Well, there's got to be, the chance to right the ship will come as a result. It'll be a capitalism solution. People will
Right.
take their dollars and they'll go somewhere else. So if you give a choice to most Americans between a woke infused product and one that isn't, they'll choose the latter almost every time. They're just not getting that choice most of the time when they go to the movies. So I think you make a great point about Disney. I think a lot of it comes from the reckoning of 2020, right? So Disney, as well as the other studios, rebuilt their pipeline to be even more serving of what it would call underserved communities. that pipeline is currently coming out now. So of all the bombs that you've mentioned, we haven't gotten to see the new Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and that's because Disney is so aware of how it'll be perceived, and they put their money behind this. I think Rachel Zegler, actress, who is just an absolute cancer to have at the top of your movie selling to American audiences. And so that's part of it is the pipeline. What you see today was paid for and developed years previous. But also you have at the top of these institutions, like we're seeing in colleges and a lot of the blue cities, is that the actual leadership is completely into DEI. I mean, a lot of them are true believers. And if that is the way that it is at your organization, only by changing that absolute, head of the ship, which Disney, by the way, did when they brought back Bob Iger, and now even Bob Iger seems to be in hot water. So, yeah, no, I mean, in a way, capitalism is built for this. If customers don't like your product, that's what happens. They'll go find a different product. I think the Daily Wire, is one of many that is, A24 with their new movie Civil War. I'm sure that's going to be of the left. However, it's going to be much more political, I think, than anything Hollywood would try touching. So I hope we'll get. And by the way, I go see even bad movies,
Oh,
but
me too.
these days I watch a lot of just movies from different decades. I'll watch a black and white movie before I'll watch some sort of Hollywood piece of crap.
I totally agree. Now, I'm curious. You say you're a cinephile, and have you seen a lot of what has come out this year? Or I should say, if you have, what would you say is the most woke movie you have seen this year? Because there's been a lot of debate about this. I'm curious. What would you say has been the most woke film? And I'm not talking about, because everyone's like, oh, such and such has a gay character in it. I'm like, having a gay character is not what makes a thing woke. It's the messaging. It's when the messaging overrides the plot. That's what I always tell people. So I'm curious, what is a woke? What do you think is the most woke film that has come out this year? I've gotten a variety of answers, so I'm really curious.
I I'm glad you asked this question because it's something I researched, in fact, last night in preparation for this interview. But as has been pointed out everywhere, right, is that comedy and wokeness can't mix, right? Because
Mhm.
comedy is by its very nature usually edgy, oftentimes judgmental. Woke is all about not punching down, which is virtually everything from a certain perspective, and that's why I researched rather than watched the movie Bottoms, which
Mm,
is about two high school lesbians who are unattractive and decide that they're going to date the hot girl in their school.
mm,
And the reason that this is the wokest movie I've ever seen is because virtually nothing, I mean, even though it's a satire, nothing actually maps onto reality. And it has a lot of the trademarks of bad woke movies. For
mm.
example, in a lot of the probably movies that we grew up with and a lot of the great movies of all time, you have really compelling villains. But in a wokeness world, that might be you have to have really pathetic villains, otherwise you fear empowering their evil qualities. So, for
Right.
example, in the villain of Bottoms is, of course, the hot quarterback of the school, who is otherwise absolutely stupid and useless. And it's obvious also that the writer has never met anyone, has never met an athlete, and simply resented them, as quarterback is literally the most cerebral position in all of sports. I mean, it's you can't really be a lazy high school starting quarterback at a big school. It's like it's an important job. It's something that you are doing, for example, after a school day.
Mhm.
But this movie is rife with those things that would never happen, and it's also rife with Hollywood politics. So, for example, Kaya Gerber, who is Cindy Crawford's daughter, absolutely gorgeous. You are imagining this woman getting her first part as, a hot girl in her movie, except she has to be the hot girl who's thinking about bisexuality, which seems to be one of the themes of a lot of wokeness is, I mean, yeah, just the premise of the two uncool lesbians going after the hottest girls in school. On its face, I mean, in any case, yeah. If it doesn't map onto reality, but it has the perfect styled messaging, I would say it takes the wokeness cake. What other competitors have you gotten though? It's a good
Well,
question.
I was going to say The Strays, which is about a African American woman who she abandons her family and she marries this rich white guy. And the movie is about her kids. They've grown up and they've come back to get revenge on her, basically. And they make her husband, who did nothing but marry her. He doesn't know about her past. She lied about it to him, but he's somehow a villain simply for being her husband. And I remember that's one of the competitors I had. It's called The Strays. It was originally released in England, but in America it was released on Netflix. And I was just appalled by it because it's not. And even when spoiler alert, the husband gets murdered in the film, they do it in a way where you're not supposed to feel bad for him, but you do, because you're like, he's a totally innocent person, he did nothing wrong. It's not, it was really bizarre to me. And it was I really felt like the tonal message of it was is we which I think is kind of funny, because even 15 years ago this would have been a racist message, is that we all just need to just be in our own communities. Like, that was kind of the message behind it, and it was very bizarre to me. But yeah, that was definitely a contender. I haven't seen Bottoms yet, so I try to avoid commenting until I've at least watched the trailer. But that does sound very interesting to me. Now here's one though. What would you say is a non-woke film that you really enjoyed this year? Tough one.
Well, actually, I mean, maybe this is a uninspiring answer, but I thought Sound of Freedom was incredibly powerful, and I was in a almost like an intellectual coma for the hour after I saw it.
Same.
It was also obviously not a Hollywood movie. Disney, it seemed, spent $5 million to try and shelve it after it was made. The whole story behind it was crazy, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, I mean, I really like original work. I mean, that's also the problem with Disney, is that their live action remake strategy is just so tried and and that's also the problem with Hollywood, is that they're so risk averse that we've almost seen every story now that they make, and they just sort
Right.
of remake them. Great movies though. I mean, so the movie that you described, that sounds like
The
a
Strays
infuriating kind of wokeism. Bottoms, you may be able, like, if you watch Bottoms with the right person, you can laugh at it and
had a
appreciate
few
the
beers.
yeah, like a form of wokeness, particularly as relayed to me by like MSNBC, will
Mhm.
drive me nuts because it's so duplicitous and um, there's so much gaslighting involved on it.
Right.
But you brought up an interesting point, which is, the natural outcome of all this seems to be this message of segregation, like
Mhm.
Barbie, which I definitely watched, and I think it was important to see, as anyone who's a culture critic. The end of that seemed to be that men and women are really going to be happier in their own worlds that they completely control,
Hmm.
rather than this happy medium. It's like the Ryan
Interesting.
Gosling character represented a frat boy that never wanted to age. Whereas in my experience of males, you start out as this frat boy, but women bring a balance to your life. And then eventually, hopefully, you grow out of the frat boy and become a father. And hopefully, men lend a similar thing a similar quality to a relationship with a woman, Barbie didn't go anywhere. There was no happy, we're all better off, balancing each other message. It was almost one of total segregation,
Hmm.
which is, it's one of the obvious contradictions, I think, of the whole ideology.
Yeah, I would say I enjoyed Sound of Freedom a great deal, by the way, but I would say also another good non-woke film is Godzilla Minus One, and like you said, it's a remake, but it's a very well done remake. I was not no, I actually didn't know what really to expect when I went into it, but it was actually really good. I actually would even say it's better than some of the ones Legendary Pictures has done, and certainly better than Kong Skull Island. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very, very well done. It was a really good movie about coming together as a community, because a lot of a theme in a lot of recent Godzilla movies coming from Japan is government ineptitude and citizens have to take care of themselves, and that's what happens in Godzilla Minus One. Is the government is inept, and at the time, uh it was during the Cold War, so they kind of have allusions to that, but they make it where these men come together and try to find a way to stop this monster that's attacking their community and their city. So I thought that was actually a very empowering message as opposed to what's coming out of Hollywood. So um, before we close up, I'm curious, where can people find you? Where can people find your book?
Well, I'm George P. Denny on Twitter. Wokelynd is in Barnes and on Amazon. Just make sure you get the last four letters right. It's Woke, Lynd. Just to be really true to wokeness, I had to misspell Wokeland, just to
that makes
reflect the education system.
that makes perfect sense. And where can people find you?
I'm George P. Denny on Twitter. I'm getting my social media going right now. I'm GOP Dan on Instagram, but yeah, try me on Twitter. It's all new for
And
me.
thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation. I look forward to reading your book.
Well, thank you so much, Jacob. I hope you have a good one. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. And everyone else, be sure to, like I said earlier, like, share, and subscribe. Go and check out George Denny's book. I'll link it in the pinned comment. You can find all my socials on my About page. And so I'll just say, everyone, have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.